To represent Oakland on the theme of revolution, we have David Allen, native of East Oakland. He was born and raised here. He is the founder, CEO, and board chairman of the Museum of Jazz and Art. That's a project that's going to happen in Oakland. And the mission goal of the museum is to bring cultures together and to raise awareness and focus on jazz history. So I talked with David for a bit, and for this talk specifically, he's going to talk about jazz bebop, and hip-hop as means of educating the masses about American culture and history. So without further ado, I want to bring up on stage our speaker on the theme of revolution, David Allen.
We're going to talk about bebop, hip-hop, architecture, and art. Now, what do they have in common with regards to revolution? How can I blend these together? A force. What is a force? How many engineers are here? Or scientists? Okay, I see a couple of engineers, scientists, okay. A force. Newton's first law. Let me give you guys a little quick. Newton's first law is a force equal to ma, mass times acceleration. In order to take this mass, you have to move it a distance, right? That takes a force. So you're in this present state, now you're going to move it to another state, right? Here to a desired state. That takes a force. I like to add the word evolve, change over time. Change over time. Let's take a look at this. My definition, in understanding the present. The most important is you transposing your story into action. So every one of us have a story to tell. A story is just a story, unless you push it into action. So you see that force, that movement? I like to move my hand, those things. But you move from present state to a desired state by force. You have a story, put it into action, break the mode. That's my definition of revolution. What is harmony? There's two definitions. One is musical, one is architecture. One of the things I've been doing over the last 7 years is taking a look at music vocabulary and then transposing that into an architectural language and expression. And that's how this museum was designed. It was designed around music, listening to music, extracting harmony. So harmony is a collective pattern of how sound is organized. Sound is organized. A collective pattern of how sound is organized, right? But in architecture, it's a collective pattern of how elements are organized. Doors, windows. Now, I added something here. Arms, legs, example dancing. Arms and legs and movement, right? So harmony is movement. It's the pictorials, what you see. So when you look at something, something harmonizes. How many musicians are here? Okay, there's a word called dissonance and consonance, right? So this has to do with harmony and projections and chord projections. We'll talk a little bit about that. Things that are stable or symmetrical, right? Things that are symmetrical, right? Or things that are stable in the ear. Consonance. Dissonance is things that are not so stable or unsymmetrical. So think about your eyes and your ears, two senses, right? Communicating simultaneously. What is bebop? Bebop is revolutionary music. They emerged back in the 1940s. It went against the grain of swing music. Swing music was a danceable music. Great music, I love it, right? But the priorities were different, and they changed and they shift to art. So beboppers, they played music and focused more on art, attracting a whole different audience, of course, right? Rather than dance music. It has fast tempos, complex harmonies and melodies. We'll talk a little bit about melody in a second. I'm going to give you an idea really quickly about melody. Melody is the floor plan. Think about each instrument being in a room playing on the melody. I'm sure you've heard songs that you don't like, right? You're saying it's not right. The songs that you do like, you hum in your shower. You know, you might be humming a song. That's you humming the melody, right? It's flow. Where a floor plan must flow as well, right? So a floor plan is the harmony. Is the melody. What you see in the building is the harmony. Beboppers, they spoke the truth, and they put it to power. Here are some of the revolutionary cats, few bebop masters. It was many more. This gentleman, Coleman Hawkins, remember, bebop started in the 1940s. He was playing music in the mid-20s, 1928, 29. This cat here, Charlie Parker, was listening to him. And he was like, wow, he was harmonizing things different. So he took this music and he started harmonizing things different. He paid attention to it. He says, hey, you know, I like this, right? These guys got together with Dizzy Gillespie. And because of social constraints, they couldn't move around. They couldn't go into venues and things like that. They started their own music. So revolution starts when you have constraints, when you have little. It doesn't start when you have a whole bunch of money, you're sitting back. It starts when you have zero or nothing. It allows you to be creative, right? These were some of the early incubators. Clark Monroe, Uptown, Minton's Playhouse, all in New York. They're owned by gangsters, but hey, that's okay. They're revolutionary also.
I want you to listen to this song and think about what shapes comes to mind listening to the song. What shapes? You see angles, you see circular, combination of the two.
To understand the present, swing music was entertainment music, right? And most of the African Americans and the blacks felt that there was limited opportunities. Although there were some African Americans who were playing swing music. You know, there was Duke Ellington, Chick Webb Band, some folks, they were kind of successful. But in most cases, they felt limited opportunities. So bebop music was more about thinking, listening, and engaging. Now, jazz music itself is America's classical music as it was defined, and has greatly influenced modern music and art around the world. Here's a cat here, Marv Yerden. He loved the music, and he allowed the music to create his art. Look at the harmonic expressions in the use of canvas, right? You don't see symmetry there, do you? You see non-symmetry or dissonance positioning of colors. So I'm using these vocabularies of both music and architecture to kind of show the correlation with art. It's all connected. Understanding the present, and again, transposing, restoring to action. Swing bands were very successful primarily due to race. Black bands in general, it was difficult to secure radio programs. They were restricted to long-term jobs and things like that. So again, here comes these constraints. Here comes that box again. And with that box comes innovation. Right? And I was back in the kid really quickly. When I was 7 or 8 years old, I used to build apartment complexes on my mom's carpet using playing cards. So again, it's that dreaming again, right? And being creative, using what you have. Not asking for something, but use what you have effectively. And allow yourself to become more creative. But black bands were forced to travel. This sounds tough, but traveling, they were able to differentiate their sound and to talk to different audiences a different way. So they became more creative, right? So they're able to create as a result of these constraints. Let's talk a little bit about hip-hop. Hip-hop started, music emerged around 1970s in New York. It was in Brooklyn, about 30 years difference between bebop. Hip-hop went against the grain also with disco music. There was a shift in priorities. And that was more toward what we call the social art rather than disco dance music. Some of the art was DJing, breakdancing, graffiti, things like that, as a result of this creation of this movement back in the 70s. And interesting enough, really quickly, from bebop, then there was this music we call hard bop, funk, right? Hip hop, speaking truth to power, believing in what you say and putting it into action. Here are some of the relationships in common. Dizzy Gillespie was one of the founders of bebop. DJ Cool, who's heard of this guy on the right? Yeah, amazing cat. Back in the 70s. So jazz, bebop, and hip hop both developed from an African American aesthetic, or the landscape of common experiences. So they all had common experiences, which were what? Financial restrictions, social movement restrictions. But they didn't see that as a negative. Of course, it was tough. But instead, they took it as an opportunity. They told their story, and they did what with their story? Action. Here are some of the few hip-hop masters. These guys were innovators. They still are innovators. I have to tell the truth. I wasn't a hip-hop cat. So my niece spent a month with me one summer. And she said, Uncle, you gotta hear these guys, you love jazz, you gotta understand the history. I said, I don't like the language, I don't like the music, I don't like this. Wow. I was like, okay, she educated me. I said, wait a minute, these cats are no more than cats that came from my community that developed a language based on constraints and conditions. Okay, now what shape comes to mind listening to this song? Who liked that? I love that song. Yeah, it's like my daughter told me that, Dad, when you play this, don't start doing the robot. I was about to go, I was about to do it, I felt like doing it, Well, I'll hold off on that. All right. So these cats here, the Nicholas brothers, now, what's interesting, right? You said harmony is what? Movement of the arms and the legs, right? Stuff like that. It's the pictorials, what we see. Here are some jazz cats dancing to music. Now, jazz has been one of this century's defining aesthetics. And you'll see the movement here. These guys are hot, right? So you saw these movements of the arms, movements of the legs, and things like that. Very harmonic motion, dancing to the same rhythms as the jazz music. This is turf dancing right here in my old neighborhood. This is 90th and MacArthur. I grew up in 72nd, but look at the arms and the legs and the syncopation to the music. Yeah. This is like modern ballet. It's just amazing, right? The movement with the music. This is all improvisation. Who knows what improvisation is? Okay. It's composing and playing at the same time. It's not really knowing what you're about to do, but you know you're going to do it because you just did it. Does that make sense? Improvisation now is being taught at Harvard, Stanford, to graduate business schools. They're teaching them how to be able to think quickly with very little information, but paying attention to their environment, right? So you're not just talking, you're also paying attention to your environment, and you're allowing it to influence your next steps and movements. Bill Dallas is a local jazz artist. Well, he's a local artist. I interchange music and art and architecture all the time because I see it as one, really. But jazz music itself and hip-hop and art are extensions of our cultural experiences. And culture is basically a learned behavior. You could take a white child, put them into a black community, and a black kid, put them into the white community. They're going to learn the culture of that community, right? It's a learned behavior. And so, with that, the proliferation of jazz itself incorporates a lot of cultures from the African American aesthetic that allow the music to proliferate around the world, basically. Now we're going to look at architecture. A collective pattern of organized sound. Okay? In architecture is a collective pattern of organized elements. We talked about that, sound elements. The curvilinear forms of the Walt Disney, right? So again, you can say curvilinear, dissonance positioning, and maybe some symmetrical rhythmic patterns of the windows. This is the Milwaukee Art Museum, Calatrava design. And I use the word here, dissonance, positioning of curvilinear forms, consonance patterns. These are all harmonic expressions. It's what you see. It's pictorial. It's pictorial what you see. Here's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, great place in Cleveland. And again, in this case, the harmonies influenced the melodies, right? This building here influenced the floor plan. So a musician sometimes composed from the harmony, which affects the melody. And some musicians will compose from the melody that affects the harmony. In this case, it was the harmony affecting the melody. Solomon Guggenheim building, again, expression of movement or music, linear expression, floor plan, we talked about that. The melody being the floor plan, it's the flow. Here's the Museum of Jazz and Art concept in Oakland. When I designed the building, I was listening to that first song, Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker playing. It's called Hot House, written by Tad Dameron. So I listened to that song about 100 times. So I started off doing the floor plan. Okay, melody, right? I said, no, that song is harmony. So I had to break my pattern and start listening to the harmonies. So I started looking at the exterior to influence the interior. But there is a balance. But here's the concept of the Museum of Jazz and Art. Designed around music, utilizing the vocabulary of both music and architecture. Here's the night version of it. Again, the fusing of the light. So if you heard Charlie Parker in his solo, he went just expressing the light, right? And that expression of the light changes over time. So that's reflected in the interior. There are prisms, and the light changes every hour, just like jazz. When you walk through the building, and you walk back out, you're going to have a different experience, just like jazz. And what's interesting about jazz also, you might have three artists play the same song. You recognize the song, but you also recognize the differences. That's what's happening here in the atrium design. Here are some other revolutionary thinkers in the Bay Area. So again, now we're saying, wait a minute, we went from architecture, art, now we're talking about folks who think differently. They have a story, they transpose that story, right, into action. Elie Wiesel, I met him in college. He wrote this book called Night, Survivor of the Holocaust. It kind of changed my life a little bit. I struggled a lot, and sometimes when you come from a certain community, you think that you're the only one struggling. And so, again, culture, learned behavior, and it's important for us to, Museum of Jazz and Art is about bringing folks together utilizing music. Snoopy is a revolutionary, no doubt, right? I mean, he took control. I wanted to be a cartoonist when I was younger. That's where this is coming from. And eventually I went into architecture. Okay, my definition again. Taking control of the present, understanding the present, transposing story into action. Now I want you to go back to your communities and not only just tell your story, okay? Your communities, your home, your neighborhood. Not only tell your story, but put it into action. Revolution.